¿Qué pasó ayer? Let's think about the past tense in Spanish. El pretérito. Now this is a new conjugation. We know that verbs in Spanish begin with an infinitive form. That's kind of the generic form of the verb. All infinitives in Spanish end in AR, ER, o IR. Okay? But in Spanish, when we're talking about the past tense, the conjugation is different. That means we'll learn new endings for the verbs we've already learned. Okay? In Spanish, we have two simple tenses for the past tense, the preterite and the imperfect. Don't worry about the imperfect for now. We're going to focus on the preterite. Okay? But the preterite is something that expresses an action, something that has been completed in the past. Just as you learned before with the present tense, you have a verb with an ending, AR, that's our infinitive. In this case, we're going to take off that AR. We're going to add an ending. Those endings for AR will be E with the accent, haste, O with an accent, hamos, hasteis, haron. So, if our verb is comprar, we take off the AR, it's going to be compré, compraste, compró, compramos, comprasteis, compraron. Now remember, they must have their accents. If we don't use the accents here, what does this look like? Compro. Compro is I buy in the present. So accents are important. They do change the meaning of words. Now let's look at an ER verb. Un verbo ER, como vender. Just like any other verb, you take off the ending and you add the appropriate new conjugation. Y, acento, iste, yo, imos, isteis, hieron. Yo vendí. Tú vendiste. Él vendió. Nosotros vendimos. Vosotros vendisteis. Ellos vendieron. Now you can see here that IR verbs have the similar conjugations as ER verbs. And just like any other verb, you take off that ending, add the appropriate ending. Escribí. Escribiste. Escribió. Escribimos. Escribisteis. Escribieron. Okay, remember, yo, usted, ella, have accent marks. You have to pronounce that accent with a stress on that vowel, as well as write them in. Otherwise, you change the meaning. Okay, you can see that ER and IR verbs have the identical conjugations. Okay, how would you know in the nosotros form in AR and IR if it's preterite or present? It's conjugated the same. For example, en invierno compramos la ropa en la tienda de la universidad. Or, anoche compramos unos zapatos de tenis y unas sandalias. We can see compramos and compramos. One is present tense, one is past tense, but they're conjugated the same. How do I know the difference? The answer is context. Context will always tell you. For example, here, anoche tells us it was last night. Now, in the present tense, we learned stem changers. There are stem changers in the preterite, but for now, let's focus on AR and ER verbs, which do not stem change in the preterite. Only IR verbs stem change in the preterite. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Cerrar. En el presente, la tienda cierra a las 6. pero en el pretérito la tienda cerró a las 6. We did not make a stem change here. Volver. En el presente, Carlitos vuelve tarde. En el pretérito, Carlitos volvió tarde. No hay cambio. Jugar. Él juega al fútbol. Él jugó al fútbol. No stem change. Remember I told you that in Spanish the preterite does not have stem changers in AR or ER verbs? Well, that means that in IR verbs there are stem changers. The stem changes in Spanish in IR verbs in the preterite are only going to happen in the third person, singular or plural. That is, él, ella, usted, ellos, ellas, ustedes. Por ejemplo, el verbo servir es yo serví, tú serviste, él sirvió. Nosotros servimos, vosotros servisteis, ellas sirvieron. Con dormir, yo dormí, tú dormiste, él durmió. That O changed to U. Nosotros dormimos, vosotros dormisteis, ellos durmieron. Let's change here again. Okay, the IR verbs are the only ones that stem change in the preterite. In this case, we have changes either from E a I or from O a U. That is to say, pedir, pidió, pidieron. Morir, murió, murieron. Ser and ir are irregular in the preterite form, but they're conjugated the same way. How do you know the difference? Context, always the answer. Okay, vamos a repetir. Because it's irregular, you'll have to memorize the conjugations. Okay, let's practice. Repiten, por favor. Ser. Yo fui. Tú fuiste. Él fue. Nosotros fuimos. Vosotros fuisteis. Ellos fueron. Ok. Ir. Yo fui. Tú fuiste. Ella fue. Nosotros fuimos. Vosotros fuisteis. Ellas fueron. Okay? Remember, we need to know context to know which verb we're using. Él fue a comprar champú y jabón. ¿Cómo fue la película anoche?